What happens when a warehouse CEO trades his suit for steel-toed boots and realizes he's the reason people are afraid to use the bathroom? Darren McCall stood in the dim light of his office, watching the security feed from Fulfillment Center 14. The warehouse floor buzzed with motion boxes flying down conveyors, workers hustling through aisles. On paper, things looked good, sales were up, orders were shipping fast, but something felt off. His assistant had handed him a report earlier that morning. Employee turnover at 14 was the highest among all 20 fulfillment centers. Absenteeism too. But there were no formal complaints, no HR flags, just workers quitting without warning. Something wasn't adding up. "This is the fourth one in 2 weeks, Darren muttered, clicking through exit interviews. Blank, blank. No comment. He rubbed the back of his neck. He hadn't been inside one of the fulfillment centers in over a year. Too busy dealing with expansion, investor calls, supply chain problems. He'd built the company from a rented garage and a used van. Now it had grown into 20 locations across 4 states. Somewhere along the way, the people on the ground had become numbers in a spreadsheet. That ends now. Within 48 hours, Darren was back in his hometown, standing in the break room of Center 14. His beard was longer and unkempt, his hair a mess. He wore faded jeans, a work vest, and steel-toed boots. A fake employee badge read, "Dan Myers Seasonal Hire." He'd never met the workers at this center. Hiring was handled by staff and local managers. No reason they'd recognize him. He made sure of that. A tall man in his early 50s with a shaved head and a clipboard walked in. "All right, new guy Dan, right? I'm Rick. I run this place. You'll be shadowing Zoe. Don't fall behind. She doesn't like repeats." Darren nodded. "Got it." Zoe was already by the sorting dock. Mid-20s, sleeves rolled, hair tied back, moving fast. She didn't look up when Darren joined her. "Grab the scanner, follow me. You scan, lift, load, no standing around. If you're slow, I'll drop you." "Understood," Darren said, trying to keep up. The pace was brutal. Boxes didn't stop. Conveyor belts hissed constantly. Every few minutes a buzzer would sound, signaling a new batch. Zoe barely spoke except to correct him. "Wrong bin. Too slow. Double scan that." By lunch, Darren's back ached. He sat with a group of workers at a plastic table. A skinny man with dark circles under his eyes shoved a sandwich into his mouth like he was racing a clock. "You're new," the man said, chewing. "Dan?" "Yeah, first day. Welcome to hell," he said. "I'm Marcus. You'll hate it here." Across from them, a woman with tired eyes and calloused hands leaned in. "You better learn quick. Rick doesn't play." "You slow down, you're on back-to-back shifts." Darren frowned. "Aren't there limits?" Marcus scoffed. "Legally, yeah, but you ask for a break, they'll just cut your hours the next week." Another worker chimed in. "Bathroom, forget it, you better hold it." Darren blinked. "Wait, what?" The woman nodded. "You ask to go, Rick'll make a note. 2 notes and you're on watch. 3 and you're unreliable, doesn't matter if you're sick. We've started skipping water." Darren couldn't speak. A younger worker nearby added, "Last week, Jasmine peed herself on shift. They told her to clean it and keep working." Darren's hands went cold. He stared at his half-eaten sandwich, suddenly nauseous. He'd built this system. The quotas, the tracking software, the scheduling algorithm, it was all his design. But this abuse, this fear, he clenched his jaw. "That's not okay." Marcus glanced at him. "You'll learn, man. Either you shut up and keep your head down or you're out. They always replace you." The buzzer sounded. Lunch was over. Zoe stood. "Let's go, Dan." Darren followed, but his mind was spinning. He'd come here looking for answers. Now, he had one loud and clear. Something was deeply broken, and it had his name all over it. Darren's legs were still sore the next morning when he stepped off the employee shuttle and scanned into Fulfillment Center 14 for his second shift. The stale warehouse air hit him like a wall, warm, dry, and humming with fluorescent lights and conveyor belts already in motion. He followed the same yellow floor line toward the sorting dock, avoiding the eyes of the floor supervisor stationed by the time clock. Zoe was already by the pallets, loading a stack with practiced rhythm. She didn't say anything when he joined her, just handed him a scanner and pointed toward a new line. "Zone C today," she said without breaking pace. "You'll pick. If you fall behind, don't expect me to cover." He nodded and followed the digital prompts on the scanner, navigating the steel racks that stretched like a canyon in every direction. The pick rate algorithm only gave you a few seconds per item. If you missed 2 in a row, the screen flashed a warning. By the third, it vibrated red. Darren noticed a short woman ahead of him, maybe in her 40s, shuffling between bins with a noticeable limp. Her name tag read Elena. She moved slower than the others, and each time her scanner buzzed, she flinched like she'd been shocked. He approached cautiously. "Need help reaching that?" She shook her head and avoided his eyes. "I'm fine. You sure?" "I can grab the top shelf." "I said I'm fine," she repeated, quieter this time. He backed off. 10 minutes later, a voice barked from the next aisle. "Elena, that's your third delay this hour. You trying to get written up again?" It was Rick. He towered over her, clipboard in hand, his tone sharp enough to cut through the noise of the belt. "No, I'm just no excuses. You know the rate. If you can't meet it, you're off the line. This isn't a charity." Elena's gaze dropped to the floor. Darren didn't move, neither did anyone else. Rick turned and saw him standing there. "You got time to gawk, Dan. Or you planning to work today?" Darren said nothing and returned to his scanner. By the time second break rolled around, he found himself in the far corner of the break room, away from the vending machines and chatter. He hadn't eaten, his stomach turned too much for that. A younger guy sat down across from him, rubbing his shoulder with a grimace. "Dan, right? You're quiet?" "Yeah, just trying to learn the ropes. I'm James. Don't let Rick get to you." "He's always like that. He always call people out like that in front of everyone," James shrugged. "Only when he feels like someone's dragging the rate, especially Elena, says she's faking the limp. She's clearly not." "Yeah, well, doesn't matter. She's been here longer than anyone." "Doesn't make her safe." Darren leaned forward. "How long you been here?" 7 months, but I've seen 4 team leads come and go. Zoe's the only one who lasted. She got tough after they nearly fired her over a bad batch scan. Everyone's afraid of Rick, even the good workers." Darren studied him. "You like the job?" James hesitated. "I liked it at first, good pay, but now it's just survival. You keep your head down, meet your rate, don't complain, that's the only way." Before Darren could respond, Marcus passed by and tapped James on the shoulder. "Rick's looking for you." "Something about a miscount in your last batch," James sighed and stood. "Wish me luck." Darren stayed seated, watching him disappear through the door. Behind him, a soft voice spoke. "You're not like the others." He turned. Zoe stood there with a plastic cup, sipping water. "You ask questions," she said. "Most new hires just nod and go along. Maybe I'm curious." "Maybe you're not what you say you are." He tensed. "What makes you think that?" She shrugged. "You move like someone who's never worked warehouse." "But you scan like someone who's seen the software before." Darren didn't answer. Zoe leaned in slightly. "I don't care who you are, but if you're here to fix something, you should know Rick's been like this for years. Nobody does anything because our numbers are good. On paper, we look perfect." "Have you reported him?" "To who?" "HR. They only care if someone files a formal complaint. Nobody does. Too risky. You complain, you get your hours cut, or you get reassigned to freezer duty." Darren frowned. "What's freezer duty?" "You'll find out if you ever cross Rick." She walked away without another word. By the end of the shift, Darren's scanner warned him he was 2 minutes behind quota. He'd spent too long checking in with workers, watching how people moved, how they avoided certain zones. The tension in the air wasn't paranoia, it was survival. As he returned his scanner to the cart, Rick approached him. "You're lagging, Dan. Not a good look on day 2. I'll pick it up tomorrow. You better." "We don't have time for slow learners." Rick turned and walked off toward the main office. Darren watched him go. Then he looked across the floor where Elena was wiping down her station with stiff, small motions. She moved like someone afraid to take up space. Enough was enough. The next morning, Darren arrived early. He pulled aside the assistant shift lead, a tall, quiet man named Chris. "Got a second?" Darren asked. Chris hesitated. What about off the record? Chris looked around. You're not with HR or something, are you? No. Just trying to understand something. Chris sighed and leaned against the wall. All right, talk. What happens if someone misses rate consistently for medical reasons? They get flagged. We log it, send it to ops. If it happens more than 3 times, they're moved to reduced hours or reassigned. Do they ever bring in accommodations? Chris laughed dryly. This isn't corporate. Out here, you either hit rate or you don't. Warehouse doesn't do accommodations. Darren nodded slowly. And Rick, Chris glanced toward the office. Look, man, Rick's been here since this place opened. He knows how to keep metrics tight. That's what the execs care about. They don't see what happens on the floor. What if they did? Chris shrugged. Then maybe things would change, but they won't. People at the top don't come down here. Darren met his eyes. Maybe they should. Chris gave him a puzzled look, but Darren walked off before he could ask more. An hour into the shift, the entire line froze. A jam on the main conveyor. Workers stood idle, waiting for the maintenance team to clear it. Rick emerged from his office, annoyed at the delay. What's going on? He barked. Sensor fault, someone called out. Line'll be down 10 minutes. Rick's eyes scanned the floor. Everyone on backup sorting, no standing around. Dan, you two, Zone B. Darren didn't move. Rick turned back. You deaf? Darren stepped forward. Not today. What? I said not today. Rick approached, his voice low but sharp. You want to be the next cut, because I got a list. Darren pulled off his badge and held it out. You won't need that list. Rick stared at the badge. It's fake, Darren said. My name's Darren McCall. Rick's face drained of color. Around them, conversation stopped. Every worker on the floor turned. I own this company. Silence tightened around them like a noose. I came here because I wanted to see what was happening. I've seen enough. Rick opened his mouth, but Darren raised a hand. You've created a culture of fear. You've humiliated employees in front of others. You've denied basic needs like bathroom breaks. That ends now. He turned to the floor. Elena, he called, voice steady. You're not being reassigned. You're being accommodated, effective immediately. He looked to the others. And anyone who's been mistreated, your voices are going to be heard, starting today. Rick stepped forward. You can't just, you're done. Darren's voice cut like steel. You're relieved of duty. Security will escort you out. 2 guards who'd been quietly called over by Chris stepped forward. Rick didn't argue. He just walked, clipboard clenched in his fist. Darren faced the stunned crew. This place is going to change. It won't happen overnight, but it starts now. No one clapped, no one cheered, but Zoe stepped forward and handed him a clipboard. Then let's get to work. The following day began before dawn. Darren stood out front as the first shuttle pulled into the lot, his coat zipped up against the sharp wind. He didn't wait at the main entrance. Instead, he greeted workers one by one as they stepped off the bus. Most gave him tentative nods or glanced down, unsure how to respond. A few exchanged uncertain looks. Zoe exited last, earbuds still in. She paused when she saw him, pulled one out. You're early, she said. I figured if I'm going to fix this, I need to start where everyone else does. She eyed him for a second. You planning to wear a tie and run a clipboard today? No clipboard, he said. I'll be shadowing Chris. She gave a slow nod, then walked inside. The tension on the warehouse floor had shifted. It wasn't gone, but it had changed shape, no longer the quiet dread of being watched, but the unease of waiting to see what came next. Workers kept to their routines, heads down, unsure if the previous day had been a one-time spectacle or the beginning of something real. Chris met him by the equipment racks, already halfway into a safety vest. He handed Darren a spare. You still want to shadow? He asked. I need to understand how things operate from your side, not just the workers. All right, Chris said. You'll get the full day. No shortcuts. They started with floor assignments. Chris moved between rows, checking shift coverage, noting where replacements were needed for callouts. Darren followed him through the checklists, watching how carefully Chris adjusted for gaps without triggering delays down the line. We're short 2 people in packing, Chris said. We can't pull from freezer there already running lean. If we shift one from returns, we'll fall behind there by the afternoon. Why not bring in temps? Darren asked. Lead time's too long. You'd need to request them 2 days ago. Darren nodded. What about cross-training more of the team? Chris glanced over. We ask, but most are too burned out to take more on. They say yes, but then they don't take the slots. Doesn't mean they're lazy, it just means they're maxed. They moved toward the far end of the floor, where the bulk shelving areas were stacked high with oversized orders. A tall woman with a buzz cut was struggling to maneuver a long, awkward box onto a lift cart. Darren stepped in without a word and helped guide the package down. She gave him a wary look, then turned back to her scanner without comment. That's Brandy, Chris said as they walked. Strongest picker on this side of the floor. She doesn't ask for help, but she needs it more than most. She injured, twice, shoulder and back, keeps working through it. We log it, but she refuses light duty. Why? Chris exhaled. Every time someone gets moved to light duty, they lose hours. It's not written anywhere, but it happens. She's got 2 kids. She can't afford that. They passed the main break room. Inside, a few workers sat quietly, eating in near silence. One man stood leaning against the vending machine, rubbing his wrists in slow circles. Darren paused. What's his name? Devon, night shift transfer. He's been doing double coverage until the new hires clear training. How long? 2 weeks. That's not sustainable, Darren said. Chris nodded. I've told upper ops before. The response is always the same. Hold the line until staffing stabilizes. Darren didn't answer. Back on the floor, a loud bang echoed from the far end of the assembly zone. A metal cart had collapsed under a misloaded stack. 2 workers scrambled back as boxes tumbled across the aisle. Chris broke into a jog. Darren followed. No one was hurt, but the scene was chaotic, items scattered, a few cracked containers leaking packing foam. A young worker crouched beside the mess, hands shaking as he tried to restack what he could. Chris knelt beside him. You all right? The kid nodded, eyes wide, but didn't speak. Darren stepped forward. How did that happen? A worker nearby answered. He was trying to move it solo, should have had 2 people. Chris turned to the kid. Why didn't you call for help? The kid swallowed hard. Didn't want to fall behind. Chris stood. You're not in trouble. Go get cleaned up. We'll handle the rest. As the workers dispersed, Darren looked at Chris. Was this avoidable? Chris didn't hesitate. Absolutely. Then why does it keep happening? Chris didn't answer right away. Because the system teaches people that asking for help costs you. Not officially, but in practice. You ask for help, you move slower, you get flagged, your hours change. Darren stared at the scattered foam. That's not how it's supposed to work. Chris looked at him. It's exactly how it works. They returned to the main office as the afternoon shift began. Zoe was already there, arms crossed, watching as a new batch of workers signed in. She gave Darren a look. You want to see what happens when we lose 2 scanners in 1 hour? He followed her to the side desk, where 2 handheld devices sat with cracked screens. She tapped the log sheet. These haven't been replaced in months. We've been swapping parts between them just to keep up. I've asked 3 times for new units, no response. Why hasn't this escalated? It has. But when your metrics look good, you get ignored. Darren leaned against the desk. What would you do if you had the authority? Zoe didn't hesitate. I'd slow the whole operation by 20%. It'd hurt, yeah, but it would give people breathing room. I'd rotate people off heavy zones every 2 hours, not 4, and I'd triple the number of scanners so we aren't fighting over broken ones. And Rick, she looked him dead in the eye. Rick was never the problem, he was the symptom. The system rewarded his results, not his methods. You want real change. You've got to change what you value. Darren stayed quiet. He knew she was right. Later that evening, he gathered all floor supervisors and leads in the break room, not in the conference space, not on a Zoom call, in person. Around him stood 15 people, most worn out, some skeptical, a few cautiously hopeful. I'm not here to make speeches, he said. I'm here to fix what I broke. He looked at each of them in turn. There are going to be changes. Effective immediately, no one will be penalized for taking water or restroom breaks. That's not negotiable. Second, the quota system is being overhauled. We're building in recovery time and shifting from hard targets to rolling averages. You'll get the details by end of week. A few exchanged glances. Third, cross-training will be voluntary and those who take it on will receive bonus pay, not vague promises. Actual dollars added to their checks. He paused. And finally, starting tomorrow, we're bringing in a third-party safety and wellness team. They'll be on site full-time, reporting directly to me. Someone in the back asked, "Is this permanent, or just until people stop looking?" Darren didn't flinch. "Permanent. And I'll be back here every week. Not as a visitor, as part of the team." No one applauded. No one needed to. As the meeting wrapped up, Brandy approached him. She didn't say anything. She just handed him one of the cracked scanners. He nodded. When Darren stepped outside that night, the wind had picked up again. The warehouse loomed behind him, quiet for now. But inside, something had shifted, not just the rules, the culture, and he wasn't leaving until it stuck. The following Monday, Darren arrived just after dawn again, this time not in disguise. He wore a company windbreaker and steel-toed boots, but his face was no longer unknown. Word had spread fast after the reveal. Some employees stared openly. Others avoided eye contact altogether. Trust, he knew, would not return just because he said the right things in a meeting. He didn't head to the office. Instead, he met Chris outside the north entry by the maintenance lockers. "How's the scanner repair situation?" Darren asked. They sent 4 new ones, 2 already assigned. "We're still short, but it's better than nothing," Chris replied, checking a clipboard. "Freight's behind by half a shift, though. We lost a few temps who didn't show this weekend." Darren motioned for him to walk. "Let's talk on the floor." They moved through the receiving dock, weaving between carts and pallets. The air smelled faintly of shrink wrap and machine oil. Darren noticed 2 workers at a table manually labeling packages, something the automated system was supposed to handle. "That normal?" he asked, pointing. Chris nodded reluctantly. "Label printer's been down since Friday. Maintenance put in a request, but it never got routed. They're doing it by hand to catch up. I'll take care of it." They reached the small corridor near Zone D, where Zoe stood with a group of new hires for their orientation tour. She paused when she saw Darren, then continued without acknowledging him. It wasn't disrespect, it was deliberate neutrality. He understood. Earning respect back would take more than policy memos. Darren peeled off toward the oversized storage area. At the far end, he spotted Brandy loading a pallet jack with long, irregular boxes. Each movement was precise but slow, her upper body stiff, her left arm barely lifting above shoulder height. "You're not cleared for this zone anymore," Darren said as he approached. "I'm short-staffed. Nobody else showed." "Who's your lead today?" "Terrence. He's covering 2 zones. Said he'd rotate me out when he could." Darren reached for the side of the pallet. "I'll help." She looked at him, then stepped back. He tugged the pallet jack into motion, grimacing as the weight pushed back. "This is brutal," Brandy chuckled once. "Try doing it for 9 hours with 1 good arm." After moving the load to the outbound dock, Darren flagged down a floor manager and reassigned Brandy to staging, where lifting was minimal. He returned to the operations room and pulled up her incident reports. Her injury had been documented twice, but never followed up with an accommodation plan. It was buried beneath efficiency updates and staffing metrics. He printed the report and handed it to the site HR rep, a woman named Aisha. "This gets addressed today. I want a full evaluation and a revised duty plan. No reduced hours, just intelligent placement." Aisha nodded. "I'll make it priority 1. Put it in writing and follow up every week." He turned to leave but paused. "And dig into everyone else with flagged injuries in the last 6 months. If they've been ignored, we fix it." Back on the floor, he found Zoe just as she was finishing her tour. "Got a second?" he asked. She waved the new hires toward the break room before turning. "This about the orientation?" "No, about the cross-training plan." She crossed her arms. "You still want to roll that out?" Yes, but I want you to run it, Zoe blinked. Me, you've been the most honest person I've met in this building. You know where the gaps are. I want you to build a real cross-training program, voluntary, paid, and actually useful. She looked at him for a long moment. What happens if I say no? Then I find someone else and they probably mess it up. She exhaled through her nose. I'll think about it. But I'm not cleaning up anyone else's mess. If I do this, I do it my way. That's what I'm asking for. Later that afternoon, a worker named Devon collapsed onto a bench outside zone during a heat cycle. He was pale, sweating through his shirt and barely able to sit upright. Darren spotted him slumped over and called for Aisha and the on-site nurse immediately. They moved him to the medical room. Darren waited outside until the nurse emerged. He's dehydrated and exhausted, she said firmly. He told me he's been doing split shifts and skipping breaks to avoid losing hours. How long? Too long. And he's not alone. Darren looked at Aisha. Effective today, no one is allowed to work more than 10 hours without a recovery shift after. I don't care how many positions we're short. We'll fall behind, Aisha said. Then we fall behind. I'd rather miss a shipment than burn out another human being. By the end of the week, the changes were already taking effect. The safety team had begun individual assessments. Workers were given anonymous feedback forms and they were using them. The bathroom log system had been dismantled. Quotas were no longer rigid targets, but part of a larger performance picture that included teamwork, safety, and communication. Still, not everyone adapted. One floor lead, named Jared, was pulled aside after multiple anonymous reports flagged him for singling out Spanish-speaking workers. Darren asked to observe him directly. Within 20 minutes, Jared had scolded a warehouse associate for not understanding instructions fast enough and mocked his pronunciation in front of others. Darren stepped in immediately. "You're done here," he said without raising his voice. Jared turned confused. You were humiliating someone for speaking English as a second language, and that's not just unethical, it's illegal. Leave your badge and vest. Security will walk you out." Jared's face flushed. "You're overreacting." Darren didn't move. "No, I'm enforcing the standard." And this time, the standard's human decency. After he left, Darren turned to the associate. "You're safe here," he said. "If anyone treats you like that again, you come directly to me." The man nodded slowly, still stunned. That night, Darren held a voluntary town hall-style meeting in the break room. No agenda, no presentation, just chairs in a circle. Over 50 workers showed up. He didn't speak first, he waited. Eventually, someone did. A woman from the returns team stood. "I've worked here 3 years. I never thought I'd see the day someone in charge actually showed up with dirt on their shoes." A few people laughed quietly, another spoke. "I still don't trust this. We've had promises before." Darren nodded. "You're right not to trust words, that's why I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to hold me accountable to action." He met their eyes one by one. "We're not going to be perfect. I'll make mistakes, but I'll make them here, not from a distance. And when I do, you'll see me fix them." A young man raised his hand. "What happens if corporate pushes back? Then they'll deal with me, and if that's not enough, I'll bring them here to see for themselves." Silence followed. Not disbelief, but something closer to cautious curiosity. Someone clapped, then another. It wasn't loud or dramatic, just real. The next morning, as the first shift began, Darren stood by the time clock. He didn't say anything. He just nodded to each person as they scanned in. Zoe walked past him, then doubled back. "You're serious about this," she said. "I have to be." She looked past him toward the rows of shelves and moving belts. "Then you've got a long road ahead." "I know." She extended a folded sheet of paper. "What's this?" "A draft of the cross-training plan. I stayed late." He took it, surprised. "That was quick. It's not perfect, but it's a start." He tucked the paper into his jacket. "That's all we need." She stepped away without another word. As the floor came to life, Darren didn't head back to his office. He joined the staging team, grabbed a scanner, and started loading. No cameras, no press, no announcements, just work, the kind that actually meant something now.